Okay. I'm going to call the meeting of the Municipality of Anchorage Salaries and Emoluments Commission to order. Desiree, could you please roll call?
Steve Reacher.
Here.
Patricia Redmond. Here. Kimberly Hayes. Here. Karen Norsworthy. Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. There is a draft agenda in front of you, and I'm wondering if there is a motion to adopt the agenda.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Any objection? Okay, the agenda is approved. First order of business is draft minutes of the past last two meetings. Members are ready. I'd entertain a motion to adopt first the minutes of the October 24th meeting.
I move we adopt the minutes of the October 24th meeting.
I'll second that.
Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Is there any objection to adoption of the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes of the October 24th meeting are approved. Next is the meeting of October 31st, 2019.
I'll move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any, oh, by the way, Bart, did you catch who moved and who seconded? Okay. Is there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Is there any objection to adoption? Hearing none, the minutes of October 31st, 2019 are approved. Next order of business is under old business. There's a draft resolution 2019.1. It's in the packet here. This was discussed at the last meeting, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the only change from what we were looking at the time before is to clarify how we may meet more often than once a year, but can only make changes or recommend changes once a year. Is that a fair summary?
That is a fair summary. I would like to say I think it would be easier on the commission and easier on the clerk's office if you had an organizational meeting annually. I think we all get the requirement on the salaries, but I think Pat has called me a couple of times and said, isn't this about time for us to meet? You know, and so I think it would help us all. I believe that we should have included a draft ordinance in there. Is that in your packet as well?
Well, this
No.
is
I
the
didn't-
resolution.
In the emailed one, yes.
Oh, I emailed that to you. I'm sorry that did not get included in your packet. It should have been. So I can have the staff make copies of that if you would like. But it's a proposed ordinance, and that's all it does. It just mirrors your resolution.
So that, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
So that it, then it becomes in the ordinance, because right now there's just a placeholder in the ordinance system.
That is correct. There is no code regarding the Salaries and Emoluments Commission.
So we do need to have, I think we do need to have something in there. And
So we don't rely on you to remind us when we
sometimes it is like we all of a sudden we realize we haven't met in like a year and a half or something.
I did have a question on the ordinance, because in the proposal under 4.10.
Could you speak up a little?
Yeah, under 4.10.020, A2, it talks about that last sentence, these compensation review meetings shall be held at least 30 days before the end of the municipal's fiscal year. And I'm wondering, is that, I know we talked last time at the meeting about first quarter budget revisions, but those typically don't happen until the first part of the year. So is there a reason that we need to have it before the end of the year?
Through the chair, I believe that is in the charter. The very first whereas, if Kim has it in front of her, I believe the charter specifies that language.
I think it is correct.
The whereas in the proposed ordinance.
Let's see. That's,
Yeah. Establishing and ensuring private charter provides.
I'm sorry, well, let me look it up in
Yeah, we
our
looked at-
binder,
yeah.
because I think our
Because I didn't see
binder
it.
probably has.
I didn't see it in the
charter.
binder either, or maybe it's back.
it should be.
So what are you looking for, the charter language?
Yeah,
Yeah.
charter language about, does it need to be out 30 days before the next?
I might have more copies.
So it's just go to 5.08. So Desiree has found it, so she has won our little Jeopardy quiz. It is section 5.08, paren lowercase c, close paren. At the end of the sentence, it says that the commission shall render its decision with respect to salaries not later than 30 days before the end of the fiscal year of the municipality.
Okay, thank you.
Barbara, refresh, so when is the end of the fiscal year?
It's December
It's
31st.
December 31st, it's the same as the calendar year.
Correct.
So that would be December. And that's.
Okay, and also to clarify, what we are looking at is the resolution. The assembly would be acting on the draft ordinance, so
Correct.
we won't
If
vote
you-
on that. We will
If you
vote on this.
adopt the resolution, then the clerk staff will ask the assembly leadership to look at your resolution and consider the proposed ordinance that assembly council has drafted.
Got it.
I'll move to approve the draft resolution.
This is resolution 2019.1, okay?
Yes.
Right.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
But then I think this is a good idea that I think all these years, I don't know why it hasn't been put into the chart and to the ordinances before. It just operated under the charter.
Any other discussion? Are we ready for the question? We probably should do a roll call since it's an actual resolution. So, go ahead, Desiree.
Steve Rieger,
Yes.
Tricia Randall,
Yes.
Kimberly Hayes. Yes. Karen Norsworthy.
Yes.
Is there any other old business? The next order on the agenda is new business, and there's one item, proposed salary increase, first item under a salary increase is public hearing. So is there any member of the public who would like to testify on the salary increase proposed? Yes, please, would you like to state your name for the record? I'm not sure where
Yeah,
we...
that was perfect.
Oh, let's just have 3 minutes? We have 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay. My name is Ernie Hall. I served 6 years on the Assembly, 2 of those years as chairman. And I want to begin by thanking you for your service, because if it wasn't for committees, commissions that do the work that you do, it would literally be overpowering to Assembly members. I want to begin by being very clear. When I ran for the Assembly, the compensation was never a consideration. To be honest with you, until after I was actually elected, I had no idea what it paid, because that wasn't the reason that I was seeking the office. And I will actually be so frank as to say that if it ever comes to the point where people are seeking the office because of the compensation that they're going to get for running for that office and succeeding, I'm not sure you'll get the level of government that you do. During the entire time that I served on this body, I've never heard another member ever discuss the fact that, boy, we are so underpaid. Outside of, you have discussions sometimes about, if you break it down to the hours put in, 25 cents an hour may be a bit low, because the time that is required under certain occasions is unbelievable. Right after I became the chair, we had the election of 2012. That was a disaster. We ran out of ballots. For 6 to 8 weeks following that, I was probably doing, I have no doubt, upwards of 60 hours a week in dealing with the public, with dealing with everything that was going on inside of the organization and the clerk's office. During the time that we worked on Title 21, the same thing. The time involved was unbelievable. That's why you're here, is to make a determination. Do I think that the current Assembly is underpaid? I don't know. That's your decision, because as I stated, when I sought that office and was elected to it, it had nothing to do with the pay. It was the fact that I wanted to do community service in that manner. So with that, I will conclude. If you have questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Thank you. Are there questions?
I love it when I cover the topic completely.
Okay. Is there anyone? Yes.
Get a bunch of old folks up here, right? Good afternoon. My name is Heather Flynn, and yes, I served on the Assembly too a long time ago. I got a very interesting postcard a couple of weeks ago. I don't know whether anybody else got it. Wasn't signed, but it dealt with, in this case, school bond issues. And of course, I went to the font of all information and called the clerk's office and said, you know, what is this, and when are bonds coming forward, and mailing ballots and all the rest of that stuff. In the course of that conversation, it occurred to me that there really hasn't been much change in Assembly, and I don't know about school board, compensation for a very long period of time. And what I do know is that the workload has astonishingly increased. The fact that this room sits like this and is full virtually every Friday. I mean, it used to be, you know, you had 2 hours of preparation for 1 hour in a meeting, and that was on Tuesday, and it lasted for about 5 or 6 hours. That's not true these days. And I mean, I saw somebody who wrote something back there on how you work your 60-hour week, and I understand that. Having been employed full-time most of the time that I was on the Assembly, I regularly put in my 90 or 100 hours a week. But I want to tell you a story about something. Red Boucher, who many years ago served 3 years on the Assembly, and when he was leaving, he told this story, which I will repeat to you. Hello? He said, when I was.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi. Can you
I'm
identify-
trying.
Let's just pause.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Pause your clock.
Could you please identify yourself on the phone?
Yeah, if you can give me a second, I'm trying to pull up my testimony. Hi, this is Senator Elvie Gray Jackson calling.
You're interrupting, Elby. Keep quiet for a minute. This is Heather Flynn.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Just let me know when I can talk, Heather Flynn.
Thank you, Elby. Okay.
Please proceed.
I was telling you about what Red said. He said, when I was lieutenant governor, all I had to do was handle the elections, and I had staff to do that. And when I was in the state legislature, I was chair of the Labor and Commerce Committee, which really had to be my particular area of expertise. But I had staff to do most of that work. He said, on the other hand, on the assembly, you have to know everything from planning and zoning to the budget to bus traffic to utility regulation, and I have no staff, and my phone is listed and it rings constantly. It's the toughest job I ever had. I think that you need to make an adjustment in salaries, but I give you a proposal. Some people need and want insurance. I don't know what it costs to insure an individual who works for the city. Take a hypothetical, $500 a month. Give the person a choice to either be insured by the city or to take the extra in the money. And I would be happy to respond to questions because I have a couple of other ideas.
Okay,
Thank you, Ellie.
Thank you very much. Are there questions by Katie?
I think at the current time, we do give that they have choice of insurance for using it for other purposes.
Does that come from the salary they currently have?
It's an addition to that salary.
Well, okay. Then I guess I would comment on one other thing. The legalization and taxation of marijuana has caused a huge amount of extra work. And it's also bringing in, I think, quite a bit in taxes, which is nice because that keeps property taxes a little lower. And since we're an aging community, residential property taxes are going to be lower still. So I think you need to think in terms of the workload of the assembly and make a reasonable adjustment. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Elby,
Thank you.
I'm bleeding now.
Just let me know when it's my turn. Thank you.
Good. Well, we are in the public hearing portion of the consideration of the proposed salary increase for assembly members. Were you here to testify on that?
Are you speaking to me?
Yes. This is Jess.
Yeah, I'm out of the state right now, and I left the meeting so that I can come and testify. Absolutely.
So, do you want to testify by teleconference, or are you planning to come?
I would like to I'm on the speaker right now, and I would like to testify right now. I hope that you'll allow me to do that.
Sure. I see no reason. Yeah, go ahead. We're allowing everyone 3 minutes to testify, so please.
Okay, I'll talk really fast because I have a little bit to say. Tell me when I'm ready.
Okay,
when you're
ready to go. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak on this issue. As a former Assembly member, I know firsthand the amount of work that is involved serving the community in this capacity. Prior to running for office and serving for 9 years, I was staff to the Assembly. I've seen the amount of work involved by 42 different Assembly members. Some work diligently on behalf of their constituents and others work minimally. I recognize that the Assembly position is considered part-time, but I know from experience that this is certainly not the case if you do your job in the way it was intended. After all, districts have approximately 60,000 citizens to serve, with 2 Assembly members working together. There are many emails received, community council meetings, work sessions, bi-weekly Assembly meetings, constituent meetings, and much more. But that said, the time spent is usually anywhere from 40 to 60 hours per week, and sometimes more. It is unfortunate that with this workload, the Anchorage Assembly has no dedicated office space and no dedicated staff. The $950 per month to hire a contractor is to assist them to assist them is simply not enough. Even if that amount was increased, in my opinion, it remains not enough. From 1988 to 2005, the Assembly had dedicated staff to assist them, a director, an administrative position, and utility budget analyst. Although this was much better than what exists now, it still was not enough. Currently, the Assembly has assistance from the Ombudsman's Office and the Clerk's Office. Unfortunately, this assistance is not dedicated because these two offices have code-specific duties. The Clerk's Office includes some responsibility directly to the Assembly as a result of the Assembly Budget and Legislative Office being disbanded in 2005. Although the Ombudsman's Office and the Clerk's Office do a fine job assisting Assembly members, this assistance is not and should not be dependent upon because, for one thing, it takes a massive amount of time taken away from other duties that are relative to their respective and descriptive offices. As a state senator, I serve 34,000 citizens solely. My stipend is $50,400. I have 2 full-time state employees, which would be 3 if I were in the majority. I have an office account, office space in Juneau and Anchorage. When in session, I spend more than 60 hours per week performing my duties, and when not in session, that number is reduced to approximately 40. Of course, decisions we make affect the state as a whole, but my work is targeted toward my constituents on a local level. Again, from my experience serving on the Assembly, this local legislative position is more multifaceted with more hands-on constituent relations because most issues are local. The Assembly position is not and has never been a quarter of a time or half-time position. Again, if you do your job the way it's intended, it is by far a full-time position. To serve on the Assembly with the current stipend is a major stress of one's time and resources, especially when most have other jobs just to make ends meet. On another note, when I was an employee of the Assembly, my position was considered executive. Fortunately, when union negotiators bargained for success and were successful in obtaining cost of living salary increases and benefit enhancements, I was the recipient of those results. The Assembly members were and are not recipients of the cost of living allowances, but are only subjected to the decisions of the volunteer commission. And I thank you all for your service. The current Assembly member compensation or stipend is approximately $34,000, which includes an additional per paycheck stipend of $250 to assess medical expenses. Assembly members are also part of the Public Employee Retirement System, also known as PERS. By the way, in order to be eligible for PERS, the person has to work at minimum 24 hours per week. Therefore, my humble recommendation, the compensation for Assembly members should be across the table $60,000 at minimum. Medical coverage should be included for each member. They should be considered full-time municipal employees because they are. Each member should have 1 full-time municipal employee dedicated solely to them. Each member should have an office within City Hall. Finding the funding for this recommendation should not be a reason to avoid consideration of this much-needed change. When the budgets are being built on an annual basis, this funding should be included in the same manner other municipal departments draft its budget. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity to offer my suggestions on this very serious matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Are there questions by committee members?
To the chair. This is Pat Redmond, LB. I was wondering if you could send us a copy or provide us with a copy of your comments.
I'll be very happy to do that. I will email it.
Through the clerk's office.
I'll email it to Barbara.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before I hang up?
Are there other questions by committee members? No, thank you very much, Senator.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
Please step forward. What's your name?
Hi, I'm Bill Evans, just another in a long line of former Assembly members. I had the good fortune of working with LV and with Ernie during my time. I got off the Assembly in 2017, so my experience is fairly recent. In my normal life, I'm an attorney, and I was during my time on the Assembly. And as an attorney, I keep pretty good track of hours worked. Basically, that's what I'm used to selling. This is my billable hours. So while I was on the Assembly, I was pretty cognizant of how much time I was spending because it was taking time away from my normal job. For my 3 years on the Assembly, and I think LV was correct that different Assembly members work different levels. Some seem to phone it in, some are very diligent. I believed I was working fairly diligently as an Assembly member during my time, and I estimated that on average I would spend 30 hours a week on Assembly matters. That includes Assembly meetings, I was chairing a couple different committees at that time, as well as the work sessions. And some people are more efficient with their time than others, but I think a diligent assembly member working hard at the job should be able to accomplish a job in about 30 hours, which is a lot. I mean, that makes it very difficult to have a full-time job on the side. That being said, with respect to the issue before you, I'm kind of of two minds to it. I believe it's very true that you get what you pay for. And I don't think political positions are necessarily an exception to that. Generally, the more you pay in salary, the better quality the people you attract. And so the better quality you may receive in assembly people. Politicians seek jobs for reasons usually other than the money. So it's not a direct comparison. But I'm also a little bit leery of turning the assembly into basically a full-time position. I think it's designed, I think it works best when it is a sort of a citizen kind of assembly that is constituted by people who are working out in the community and doing the assembly as an add-on to their other positions. So I think you have a tough job of, I disagree with LOE that it should be a $60,000 a year job and essentially a full-time job. I don't think that's in the best interest of Anchorage, but I'm not opposed necessarily to adjusting their salary based on the recommendations. So if you have any questions.
Are there questions by?
I just have one, and I don't know if this is maybe through the chair to Barbara. Last meeting, we got a research on hours worked based on, I think it was based on meetings, solely meetings, right? So this is 2019, but the Salary and Emoluments Commission report said that 60 to 70 hours for a member, and that's a month, right? This was a month.
That's
For a
what I
member
said.
who doesn't have a full-time job, for a member who does work full-time, it's closer to 40 to 50. Is that about what you had in 2017?
Yeah, I'd say 30 hours a month, because I think outside of the actual meetings, which is easy to track,
Right.
the preparation for the meetings, which is a little bit harder to track, and then you have community council meetings and things like that that may not show up on your meeting, and then whatever constituent meetings you have is going to vary pretty widely, but pretty consistently 30 hours a week is what I would think that a diligent assembly person would actually commit.
Quick follow-up. Did you have to manage social media? Did you have a social media presence as well?
No, just my
Okay.
own, whatever my own personal is. Yeah.
Just thank you.
I wanted to ask about the volume of emails and communication that you get from your constituents and potentially from the clerk's office and administration. Do you know about how much?
It would vary greatly depending on the issue. There are certain times when we're dealing with a certain pretty hot issue, you'd get 100 emails in a very short period of time. And again, assembly people operate differently. Because I was new to, I only did one term, so it was always new to me. I made a point to always respond to every email, even if it was just to say, I got it, thank you for your response. So it would take, at times, a few more hours a week when we were dealing with something that was a pretty heated issue. Otherwise, I would only get 5-10 emails a week outside of those periods.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Thank you. See? Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
In reference to Kim's comment about the 60 to 70 hours, that is a week. That little word is meant to be per week.
On here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So 60 to 70 for somebody who doesn't have a full-time job per week, 40 to 50 somebody is working.
And that number is just based on meeting hours on the following page? Okay.
This number is based off of communications with assembly members, giving an estimate.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. That helps my brain.
Okay, so I stand corrected, because I think we first thought it was a week,
Yeah.
then we determined that it must be a month, and now you're saying it's a week.
So
We're looking at the same document.
This graph is just committee meetings and regular meetings, special meetings for a month. But the little blurb on the front sheet is week. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please, come forward.
Hi, thank you. My name's Alicia Hildy, and
Does my time start first, or?
Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay, well, I serve on the Anchorage School Board, and you gave us a raise recently, so I thought when I saw this notice I should come and share some of my opinion on that. When we talk about giving raises based on the amount of hours worked, that's just going to continue to increase the number of hours worked. If we're looking at a bigger picture of what kind of people who should be eligible to serve in our municipality, certainly we want all people to be able to serve, not just wealthy people who can afford to take off time or people who are retired. We want young people who have to work 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week to be able to come in and serve. One thing I see in our municipality is that we try to do a lot of everything, and sometimes we end up not doing that as well as we could. My background, I'm an attorney, but my background is in music, and when I work on something, I focus on very specific things, work those down, set a goal, work on the next one. That's how you improve those skills. And I take that same approach in municipal service. If our municipality is doing more and more and more, it's hard to do that well, but it's so tempting because they're all important. When we make the salary raise increase to that, we're saying you should do more of those little things, but that small board isn't designed to do, it's not a board, but the assembly is not designed to do everything. They're supposed to choose, right? That's the hard part. That's why we have elected representatives to choose what are going to be our priorities. So I just hope you'll consider the consequences to who won't be able to do this job if it becomes, as was mentioned, a full-time job. Who can stop their career for 3 years to step in here, step out, do the campaign on top of it, versus if it becomes more of a 10 to 20 hour a week job, then that opens it up to a large number of people who could do that either as a part-time in retirement or as a stay-at-home mom or somebody who's working a very demanding career. And then we have the benefit of all those different voices coming to the table, which I believe is everyone's goal. So I just hope you'll keep it in consideration. I saw Mr. Dyson's request for a lab. This is real money we're talking about. If you even reduce the compensation, that's real money that can go back into our community. And the same thing with the school board. There is no evidence showing, just an example, salaries for school board members on student success. There's no correlation between that. Many places it's zero or even a de minimis compensation. I'm not sure what the research is for municipal assembly, but when I talk to other communities, they're always quite surprised at how much compensation people here receive. And what does that mean? Do we want this to be a full-time job, or is this something that we want every citizen to be able to come and offer service for hopefully a limited time? Okay, thank you. Oh yeah, your question.
You might have questions. And I have one first.
Oh, I have a question, but I don't want to
Go
put you in
ahead.
the spot. You talked
No,
about
no,
how
it's
they
fine.
take on so many things and need to focus. Do you have any recommendations on that? Like, how would we?
Well, I
how would
only
we
know
as a salary
from
like-
my perspective, but I see it. So much of what we do on the school board is saying no to things.
Mm-hmm.
All of the things are important, but if we're going to improve, let's say you wanted to do reaping or crime, right?
Right.
Or homeless, all of those, you have to focus on. We're going to focus on these 3 areas, and you don't get to put everything at the forefront. It's a prioritization. It's not easy. There's no suggestion that it's easy, but an increased salary doesn't help that get done better. It just says, well, maybe you should be doing this or this or this. Having a lower salary, in fact, makes you really focus your time and really say, we have this, I only have 10 hours to do this project. What are we going to do? Let's come to the meeting prepared. Versus what happens a lot is we show up and there's just chatter, and sometimes that's good. Sometimes just conversation is good, but there is an element of focusing the work.
Any other? So I have a question, and this is a little off the subject, but I think it's close enough that it's fair to bring it up in a public hearing on this. Do you have just an opinion or a sense on what the total workload of a school board member is in terms of the hours per month or per week?
So
compared to
it's
assembly?
very interesting, and I'm research based in my approach to things. So what is good and what isn't good? You can do as much as you want. So the first step I did when I was on the school board is I did the math. I said, what would be a reasonable salary I don't want to be stealing from people, right? I said, I want to make sure I earn my very generous package. And so for that, it's about 10 hours a week you have to get in to have a, reasonable, I don't know, you could call reasonable pay whatever you want, but I just, kind of estimated. I would say most weeks it's 20 hours. Some people push it pretty high. But there are problems when that happens because we are different from the municipality or the assembly as a board. You come in, you give government oversight, and then you go home, and that go home part doesn't always happen. Of course, we're out in the community and getting to know and understanding the needs, but steering the ship is our responsibility, and sometimes we get distracted. I call it bright lights, or idea fairies. And we are very strategic. We're involved in our strategic planning right now, and I welcome you to participate. But those will be the goals that we focus on. And if you don't work those goals, you get distracted going on other things. So it's not as much work as the assembly, though. And whether that should be or the assembly should be doing that much work is another question. But I hope you'll just consider.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may
Yes.
I ask a couple of questions?
Sure, I see why not. Go ahead.
So I have a question for you. Do you know how many pages your board packets are?
They're not very many pages. I've seen the assembly's books are significant.
I think I checked last month, they had, or the last 2 months, their packet averaged 723 pages.
And I'm not disputing that the assembly's doing a lot of work. I'm just asking you to consider that in raising salaries, it invites doing more work, and maybe not every part of that work is necessary. Sometimes, one thing we pull back is the way we do resolutions, right? All those papers add up, and
so
if that's a choice.
I think the other part that I will make is that of those 723 pages, and I think the municipal attorney and the other assembly members can confirm that, those include resolutions, ordinances, assembly memorandums, and assembly information memorandums. The assembly has a duty to vote in the code. They are required to vote on every single one of those. I would suggest that not or choosing which of those items to focus on would be possibly a dereliction of that duty. An assembly member may not walk out and not vote, or I think I would suggest I would like them to read that and understand it, and I think all of us would before they vote, since they have a duty to vote. So I might suggest that the role of a legislative body and the duty to vote might not allow assembly members to choose what they do.
And certainly they do need to come prepared to meetings and read those pages. There's a lot more that assembly members do, how meetings go, how you organize time, which community events you go to, what extra committees you set up. There's a lot of other factors, but certainly they have to come to their meetings prepared. I don't think anybody is disputing that.
Thank you. Great. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for your testimony.
Okay. My name is Dee Ennis. I'm the current Deputy Municipal Attorney. And in that capacity, I represent both the administration and the assembly. We do a lot of backup for the assembly. And I myself have pretty much devoted myself to a lot of assembly work. So I'm in my sort of personal capacity. I'm not representing either party. 3 points, hours. Just personal observation, about half of this group is working full-time, the current assembly, and I can just verify that. Another probably 30% are working almost half-time, and only 1 or 2 are working less than a third time. That it's largely half to full-time and many full-time. Many of them have been forced to quit their full-time jobs. Now, having said that, do I think therefore they should be paid one-for-one for their service here? Absolutely not. I think whether the assembly should be paid full-time salaries when they choose to work full-time, that's a much larger community discussion. that's fundamentally a different model than we've operated under. But having said that, I think that this group there are two reasons I encourage increase in salaries. One is there has to be some recognition of the real hours worked here, and there's just no way that they can work 20 hours and less and do an effective job. Whether they take on all sorts of other things, that's a different thing, but again, that's just unrealistic. When I heard some of the hours, I went, that's just not what's going on. But the other thing is who you attract for this service. Public service, you shouldn't be penalized for public service that you don't care about pay. And these are long terms, 3, 6, 9 years. And to lessen your earning capacity over that period of time, you've really taken out a huge group of people. That those are people we also want. So I think it's just sort of unrealistic in this day and age to say that public service, you don't need income or you need a nominal amount of income. You're already getting out of you're not going to be excelling at your job. You're already making other sacrifices to serve on that assembly, besides not seeing your children. And so even, again, number one, this group is working, and the last one too, they really work way more than 20 hours a week. That's very unrealistic. Lots of responsibility. I agree with the last speaker. At some point, there needs to be more of a community discussion about how much is the assembly going to do. They weren't hired as full-time people. They seem to be more than willing to put that time in. But there still should be some recognition of their time as much more than a part-time position, and that you really want to attract other people besides self-employed and retired. That it really precludes whole segments of our community from service.
Thank you.
You mentioned that several of the current assembly members have had to leave their employment. Do you know how many?
I can think of, I believe, 3
Of the
have left.
and any previous assemblies where you knew that was a problem as well, where people were leaving?
Not as much. It seems the assemblies are getting more and more and more active as they go. And I think part of that is a lot of pressing community issues like homelessness, and that they've moved to a committee structure, which involves a lot more time. It actually is much more efficient. So there's been a lot more draw on their time. I think it would be hard for someone to be an assembly level and work really less than 50% of the time would be very effective at this point in time.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? No, thank you for your testimony. Anyone else who wishes to testify? Sure, go ahead.
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I live in the Valley. Follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriately, the decision made by the governing body is more likely in the public interest. In my opinion, though, is that consider I'm basically only one that basically has what we call neutral in my opinion, because everyone here was either on the assembly, I'm on the school board, former assembly members and so forth. I'm the only one that doesn't have what we call a financial scenario, that what I say, I'm going to have a personal gain. And what I've got to say to you is this: if you were a company and you're reviewing job performance and the party did not do a good job, do they get a raise? The answer is no. What is the performance of the assembly for the last several years? Let's go to the most recent scenario. The school board in July announced that they were going to move their meetings on a Tuesday night, the same nights, Tuesday nights as the assembly. I raised concern in July to the assembly. August it went into effect. There was budget hearings, for example, just this month alone, 2 meetings of the regular meetings of the assembly, same nights as the school board. There's school board members right here in this room, 2, but one disappeared. You're not school board. No. Oh, no, okay, I missed. One spoke. And the fact is, they conduct a policy of difference, and so has the assembly. What I witnessed in the 8 years was my hope that there'd be more people at that microphone speaking out, addressing their public opinion. But the record clearly shows there are fewer people attending these meetings. Why? Because there's been a policy of disrespect to members of the public. They say, what is the use? Why should I attend? And they move agendas in a fast-tracked way where there's no chance to figure out what's going on and be involved. So what do you do? I'll remind you also there's a state budget crisis. People are wondering what their future of their jobs. Is this the time to say a salary increase to elected officials? Certainly not. Because the public is saying, what have you really done? There should be a question whether they should be punished for irresponsibility in a way financially in carrying out non-compliance with the open meetings law and state laws providing a reasonable opportunity for the public to be heard. That is what's happened. And I remind you, every election since 2012, I've declared it illegitimate. I don't say that slightly. I say it carefully, and I have no other choice. The failure of accountability of the public to be engaged before that and most important decision of the Assembly, which includes the dealing with the election of the school board. The result is, when those elections are not valid, the end result is, how can you do anything else? But they have continued to do it and everything else in respect to not connecting with the people appropriately. So you're here in closing to award them, and I'm seeing resolutions, to award them an increase in pay. It's not going to settle well. And I'd like to remind you to this. Look at how, in closing last few seconds, look at how this meeting was run. The agenda is not published so the public would know. The resolutions out there are not out for the public. Even the Assembly does respect that something, to some degree, get that information out. But these meetings, the public is totally blind to what's going on. And you're having this meeting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and when most of the people in Anchorage are working to get and deal with a living. Thank you. And I got to go because I got to deal with a legal meeting in the Valley. Another one, too. Oh, do you have any questions?
Other questions? Yes.
I would just like to really make a comment. Our role is not to determine job performance or whether or to punish that. Our role is to make sure that the salary is an appropriate salary for work. You know, we have to make the assumption that the salary is based on when somebody does a job well.
Can I respond to that? Short response.
Yes, you may.
And show you an example where when I was raising concerns on salaries and dealing with like the Borough Assembly, in their budget hearing process, there was a motion, guess what? To cut the salaries. To cut the salaries. Because people are realizing, how can we be getting this money in such a way when a lot of people are going to be losing their jobs and their decisions are a factor to losing their jobs. So that did not go through, but already out in the Valley, they show that respect, even bringing it up. And I've been the one that's been bringing up Anthony Curtin and some others. There are new members on the Assembly, and I think it's going to move more speedily because of those new members that are on the Assembly. Because unless they really, one last thing, and just in reference to their earning monies, and just as a comment, when I brought that up and see the remarks about the Assembly, okay, one Assembly member on the side, not in a public meeting, says, I need that money. I need that money. Well, the fact is, these people should not be on the Assembly, elected office for the purpose of getting money. They're there they're a public service. They're there, they're concerned about the community, to be involved, and that is not the way it should be. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, Matt, thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else here to testify? Go ahead. Okay. Yeah, please come up.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah.
Members of the Commission, my name is Melinda Taylor, and I'm a former Assembly member. I thank you for the opportunity to testify. I had the honor of serving on the Anchorage Assembly from 1998 to 2003. As a former Assembly member, I can tell you it's a job, not a hobby. In fact, it's a full-time job that exceeds 40 hours a week. My time on the Assembly involved an enormous amount of researching issues, reading background material, crafting language for ordinance and resolutions, responding to emails, calls, attending meetings during the day and in the evenings, and interaction with the general public at all hours of the day. For example, for a period of months during a time when a trailer park was closed in East Anchorage, I received calls as early as 7 a.m. in the morning and as late as 11 p.m. at night from distraught constituents concerned over their future and looking for someone to listen and to help them. I happily and willingly ran for the Assembly, and I share this story not for sympathy, just the recognition that this is a professional job with fiduciary responsibility. Assembly members serve a constituency of more than 60,000 people and receive less compensation than state legislators who serve 34,000 people and have a full-time staff. I agree with Assembly State Senator L.B. Gray Jackson that compensation for Assembly members should be raised to a minimum of $60,000 for medical coverage that should be included to each member. They are considered full-time employees, and they are full-time employees. Again, I thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts, and I respectfully will answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you. Are there questions by committee members?
In 98 through 2003, which is a big span, how many hours, what was your average compared to today? Would you say that the workload has increased?
Well, I had to have a full-time job in order to survive. So I had to have a full-time job plus my assembly time. So, and during that period of time, we were handling a lot of controversial issues, the sale of ATU, the closing of some trade reports. There were a number of issues that required the time that you just couldn't say, I'm going to spend 10 or 20 hours. You had no choice. I know that during that time we didn't have as much social media, so a lot of the response that we did was emails or letters to people, a lot of phone calls. But whenever people talk about reducing salaries or people should earn less, I always worry about the dumbing down of our population, about the povertization of our population. We've always been a country that moved forward, that looked forward, a community that looked forward. There was a time in Alaska when people wanted to come here because they made good wages, and we attracted the best and the brightest. And the reality is, you're not going to get the best and the brightest working at $5 an hour. It's just, and I'm as patriotic and as committed to serving my community as the next person, but you got to be able to eat, and you got to be able to afford a mortgage and a house and food, and that's what we're talking about.
Thank you. Are there other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good afternoon. My name is Daryl Hess. I serve as the Anchorage Municipal Ombudsman. I think I bring a little bit different perspective to this. I've been very active in the community. I was my community council president for 5 years. I worked for 2 mayors and an acting mayor. And for the last 7 years, I've worked in the Assembly Department as the Ombudsman. And so it gives me it's given me an opportunity to look at how the 2 branches of our local government operate, the executive and the legislative. And the reality is, we have big government in Anchorage. And I know the authors of our charter saw Assembly members as being citizen legislators, a part-time position. But in reality, in 45 years, that has changed dramatically. It is a full-time position. And we're compensating those elected officials who are responsible for the municipal and school district budgets that total $1.2 billion. They are responsible for enacting all ordinances, for approving appropriations of all monetary appropriations, for approving ballot measures, land use codes. I mean, the list is endless. We're compensating them at a lower level than they could make working at most fast food establishments in Anchorage. And, one of the things as Ombudsman we look at is fairness and equity in government. And honestly, that's not very fair or equitable. I look at one of the things about government at any level, there's supposed to be a balance. For the federal and state governments, it's between the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. In municipal government, we have to have a balance between the legislative and executive branches. And I know we have a strong mayoral form of government. But in reality, we have become so out of balance. There is such a disadvantage for the legislative branch because you have an executive branch. You have a mayor who's compensated at $125,000 a year. He has a dozen or more department directors that make 6-figure incomes. They have thousands of employees to do their research and their due diligence. And on the other hand, you have 11 assembly members who struggle to work full-time at a compensation rate that is part-time. Their entire department is composed, outside of assembly members, of the clerk's office, the ombudsman's office, and the assembly council's office. Less than 20 employees with no full-time dedicated staff to do their research. And I can echo what several of the former assembly members have said. I, as ombudsman, our members of the clerk's office, we struggle sometimes to do the duties we have outlined in the code while assisting members of the assembly, because sometimes they do need help with drafting or with research. The adequate compensation limits the diversity of our local elected governing body and discourages individuals from seeking election. The current imbalances between the two branches of local government gives the executive branch an unfair advantage. Adequately compensating the members of the assembly will help restore balance to local government, will foster greater diversity on the body, will allow for a more inclusive, efficient, and effective local government process. The people of Anchorage deserve full-time representation by those whom they elect to represent them. The public elects the mayor to run the city. Voters in the assembly districts elect assembly members to represent their interests, to speak for them, to work for them, and they deserve full-time representation.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there questions about committee? Kim, before you start, we're getting close to 5. I entertain a motion to extend the meeting if people can, depending on what people's abilities are.
I move to extend the meeting to 5:30.
Can you make it to 5:30? I can't go back.
I'm trying to
But
get
it's been, is there a second?
Second.
Yeah. Is there objection to extending to 5:30? Okay, so we're going past 5. So now other questions.
Just a quick question. You mentioned your office does some services for the assembly. How many hours a week are you?
It can depend.
Yeah.
5 hours maybe, but I put in 60 to 70 hours a week. So maybe I would have a little better life-work balance. Sometimes I do drafting resolutions for the clerk's office because they're overwhelmed. Sometimes I do research for assembly members sometimes they ask me to review an ordinance. One of the things that troubles me is assembly members that are struggling to work a full-time job and serve their constituents to the level they would like to, they frequently can't do their due diligence and the research that they would like to do or should be doing. An example is the administration brought forward an ordinance a few months ago to codify a policy and interpretation that the Ombudsman's office had a problem with. We thought there were we have major concerns. We drafted a memo, sent it to the assembly with our concerns. They held a work session. Some of the assembly members did a lot more research after we brought forward our concerns, and eventually the assembly killed that ordinance, postponed it indefinitely because of their concerns with it. Had we not raised those issues in the Ombudsman's office, I have no doubt that ordinance would have passed 11-0, and it had some serious problems. So having people struggling between serving their constituents full-time and working a full-time job, I think had they been able to do a little more due diligence, that ordinance probably wouldn't have gotten to the stage that it did. I just think we would have a more effective, efficient government process if we had full-time, if people could afford to serve full-time as members of the assembly. A lot of them do. I've seen the increase in the workload over the last few years with the marijuana being legalized. And it's hours and hours and hours of meetings and regulations.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Okay, thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to testify? Yes, please come forward.
Hi.
Go ahead. You're on.
Great. Hi, my name is Jenny Marie Stryker. I currently serve as the political director for the Alaska Center, but I'm here representing myself and my own views as a constituent, and also as a previous campaign worker. And I, for the record, live in District 3 in Cameron, in Austin's district.
And I should tell you, we're limiting everyone to 3 minutes.
Cool, great.
Just to give you a heads up.
I think I can do that. So I am here really just to echo, I'm sure, what's been said previously. From my knowledge, the Assembly is a full-time job. I have talked to Austin a little bit extensively about this. It's 30 to 50 hours a week minimum for her. Of the assembly members, I think there's only one who hasn't reduced their hours at their standard job or their other position. And I think that's Suzanne LaFrance, and I believe she's considering reducing her hours too. I think that there's two main things that I focus on for why we should increase assembly salaries. One is that if we want the assembly to represent us, we have to pay an adequate wage for this job to be accessible for all people. This job is just simply not a job that can be held by a single mom. It's not a job that can be held by somebody with a lower income. Like if you look at our current assembly, and I am a big fan of the assembly, and I think it's great that we have really well educated, really well prepared people on there. But if we look at the lay of our assembly, we have a lot of members from a very specific class, and I do not think that currently the wage is like accessible if you don't have a job that provides you flexibility, that provides you enough salary that you can balance out taking a hit to your income. This is something across the board, and I think I have a good example too that illustrates it from my position as a campaign manager. I have a close friend who, I don't want to say her name without clarifying that with her, but I have a very close friend who would be an amazing elected representative who wanted to run and could not because of the payment. Like with this and that situation, I'm sure is not an isolated incident, but just from the personal side, I wanted to share that. And then the second thing is just I think if we want our assembly to be effective, we should pay the assembly members enough so that they don't have to balance out this job with another duty. I think we've all seen the assembly books. We know how big they are. We know how much work that they do. It is too big of an ask. If you were at a normal job and you were being asked to do your duty, you would not be asked to do another side job and balance them out completely without negotiating those with each other, hopefully. Yeah, I mean, in summary, I think my main issue and the thing that I am concerned about most as a constituent is I want my assembly members to look like me. I'm a young, probably underpaid person. You couldn't elect me because I couldn't take the pay, and I'm overpaid what the assembly is paid right now. So we should make this job accessible to everyone from every type of life, no matter their background, because that's what representation means.
Thank you. Other questions for Ms. Stricker? No. Thank you for your testimony.
Yeah.
I think we've covered everyone.
Can I just ask a question, please? Please?
Yes, it's kind of it's out of order, but I think go ahead and through the chair. Yeah.
You know, Daryl mentioned the impact on the ombudsman's office. I'd like to know the impact on the clerk's office.
So,
Hourly per week. Is that what you're asking?
so I'll ask the question. So, what does what kind of assembly workload hits your eyes?
Well, I would say that Daryl and I work very closely together. We are, Daryl, Dean Gates, and I are the three managers in the Assembly Department. I think Ms. Gray-Jackson is correct that the Assembly Budget and Legislative Office was eliminated a number of years ago. And as a result of that, the work on budget, ordering meals for them, and assisting with legislation, it hasn't gone away. So the clerk's office got one staff person out of that, and it was just filled in the last 5 years, and that's Desiree's position. So Desiree is doing quite a bit of the budget work, but as far as the drafting, the legislative drafting, that's gone to Daryl and I, as well as Desiree. So the three of us, and also Mandy Honest is doing some drafting. I think our former deputy clerk, Lisa Schlusner, did some drafting. And you can see Dee Ennis is nodding over here. So we're the ones that are doing the drafting. In the last couple of years in my office, I have this little row of binders up here, and the binders are what we call our rewrites. We have The clerk's office has led the rewrite for the towing code. We've done 2 rewrites of Title 28 for elections. We are doing a quasi-judicial rewrite, and we have done 2 rewrites of Title II. So all of that work, that rewriting work, and we set up a binder for the groups like that. Dee is working with us now on the Title II rewrite, but most of that drive has come from the clerk's office. And then we become the scrivener. The lawyer, Dean Gates is the lawyer, but he's listening at the meetings, so someone from the clerk's office has to do the editing if someone wants to put intend instead of target in the document. So that's our job. And then the other big area that we've done is probably the recognition resolutions. So the recognition resolutions have really increased, and the members think it's really important. I've told them that if we didn't get additional staff, we couldn't do it. And Daryl does probably about 1/3 of the recognition resolutions, Black History Month, Women's History Month, Filipino month, and that last night we did South High football and South High flag football. It brings people to the assembly that have never been there before, and the assembly is not willing to give that up. So that is an increased workload, and then the other one is social media. And I have someone that works half-time, that's all she does is social media, and then I have other staff that do press releases, take photos, and also help. So it is a burden on the clerk's office. We're happy to do it, it's part of our job, but the lack of their staff does cause work to come to us.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to testify? I think we've covered everybody. But before we close the public hearing, I just want to note that there were some documents that were either included in our packet or handed out. And I'll take advantage of the fact that we have Deanna's here. If they are unsigned, are they admissible for us to consider? Are unidentified as to the source?
Well, I think they're admissible, but what credibility you give them, they're unsigned.
Okay. Yeah, there are three that are clear who it's from. There's one that was not signed at all, and so I think, okay, I appreciate that opinion.
Through the chair,
Yes.
I'd like to clarify, anything that comes to you via email, whether it's signed or not, is part of the record. I will let you know that we're discussing a motion for reconsideration from the assembly members, and the code allows them to file a motion for reconsideration. It must be in writing. It does not need to be signed. An email is sufficient. So I don't think that, I'm not sure if you are you able to identify all of these?
There's one that we couldn't, or I couldn't. It's the one that's labeled A Light Week in the Life of an Assembly Member.
Oh, I can identify that for you. I'm sorry that wasn't identified. That is Assembly Member or Assembly Chair Felix Rivera prepared that.
Oh, okay. Okay, and I think the rest all have a name on them. Okay, so I think we'll close the public hearing and keep going. Where is my agenda? Here we are. So we're open for discussion on the proposed salary increase that was here from the prior meeting.
This was in 2019,
Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to move to amend Resolution 2019-2, and I will rely on the expertise of yourself and others to do this in the appropriate way. Do I need to go into depth with my motion before we discuss it, or?
I think it'd be very
Okay.
appropriate if you make a motion, get a second, and then we can discuss it.
Sounds great. So I'll start over. I'd like to move to amend Resolution 2019-2.
Okay. Do you have either a copy or can you describe?
I can describe it. Section 1, letter B, number 2. The line April 2020, I'd like to change. Currently it says 36,712. I'd like to amend that to 67,204.80. Secondarily, Section 2, Part B, number 2, where it says April 2020. Currently it says 32,552.00. I'd like to amend that to be 60,008, so 60,008.00.
It's been moved and seconded, so now you,
Sure.
do you motion?
Yes, so,
Or your motion to amend.
Thank you, Chair. Since our last meeting where we had some information about, in our last meeting, we requested information on what other bodies make in our state. And between that meeting and this meeting, we've gotten new information about other bodies of same level of duties in cities the same size as ours. And what I'm referencing are two documents we got in the packet. Was that yesterday when we got that email? One of them is entitled Dear Commission Members, and the other one is entitled A Light Week in the Life of an Assembly Member. One of these documents references, if you look at a population, our city like Cincinnati, population 301,000, they're paying their city council members $65,000 a year, but if you look at that in Alaska dollars or Anchorage dollars, that's $100,000 in Anchorage. Pittsburgh, population 302,000, paying its members $43,000 a year, which is $63,000 Anchorage dollars. So that gave me a bit more perspective. The salary survey that we were looking at before was the Matsu Borough, Juneau City, and Borough Assembly, not cities the same size as ours, with the same number of hours involved. So that's one thing I want to bring up. Additionally, in these two documents that we were provided yesterday, it became pretty clear that in the age of social media, our assembly members are expected to be accessible 24/7, not only on their phones, but they're expected to be posting when they're at these events. People expect that. And I respect the comments made by one of the public testifiers that they should prioritize and focus on other things, but it's really hard once they've been doing all this work for Anchorage. We're going to always expect that level of service. It's really hard to back down from that. So we've, as a society, come to expect them to be available to us all the time. And is that a bad thing or a good thing? That's not for me to decide, but that's one thing that they're facing. I also want to mention that while this is a public service, it shouldn't be a choice between public service and paying your bills. You should be able to do both of those things, especially if we want competent assembly members who can dedicate the brain space to doing the due diligence that they have to do. In one of these documents, I think it's the Light Week, the assembly member, now we know, Chair Rivera mentioned that he received a binder on a Friday with 882 pages that he needed to be read up on by a Tuesday, with no staff, and he has to understand what's in the binder to be ready to vote on those things. That was pretty compelling to me. I can't imagine having to read that many pages over the weekend and understand it and comprehend it and be not an expert, but almost an expert on the contents. If we want to attract a diverse assembly and make sure that the extremely low rate of pay is not a detractor for somebody who could really provide a great public service to our city, we can't make that the barrier. As a young person in our community who does do a lot of volunteer service, I do know a lot of other professionals like myself who would make great additions to the assembly but could not do it because they'd have to give up a full-time job just to be able to, because they would want to do their due diligence. And it shouldn't be that way. They should be worrying about what's in the packet and reading those ordinances and not how to pay the bills, or whether or not they have to quit their full-time job, or should they continue to do this? Is this something that they can manage financially and mentally? That's my comments. Thank you.
Is there other discussion?
I'd like to make another amendment
Oh,
to supplement.
amendment to the amendment? I guess it's in order.
To follow up on Kim's, under section 1B2 and the salary for 2021, doing the, adjusting that to the 1.5 would make that annual salary going from 37,250 to 80, would change that to 68,203.20. And on section 2B2 for April of 2021, changing that from 33,030.40 to 60,902.40.
I'll second that.
Do you want to speak to your amendment, to the amendment?
Yeah, I just echo everything that Kim said. I would have said, I think exactly the same thing. And I would just leaving in the 1.5 cost of living adjustment for 2021.
Okay, any other discussion on the amendment to the amendment? I might have some questions on the main motion to amend, but I think I don't have an objection to the amendment that was just made to amend the 2021 salaries. Is there any objection to the amendment to the amendment? Okay, hearing none. Now the main amendment motion is before us, which has revised salary numbers for both 2020 and 2021.
Are you ready for comments?
Yes, we're under discussion.
I'm really having heartburn going from 36 to 60 something, just because there's so many other things to consider. I'd be more comfortable going halfway up. That's a big jump. And part of it is those people who come on new will get the new rate, and the old people still continue at the current rate. Is that right? Yeah. That's right.
It'll be half,
Yeah.
let's see, it'll be 5 of the 11, correct?
Right.
Oh, just clarifying.
Through the chair?
Yes.
That is inevitable.
Yeah,
No
it
matter
is.
when you do a raise, that is inevitable.
That's true. But I'm just not comfortable with going to 60,000. I might consider it. I'm comfortable right now with what we originally proposed, which is, and because that's a change. Again, I'm thinking about what the budget is, what our the current, without knowing. I mean, we're trying to predict what the economy might be in the future, in a way, in some ways. I'm not sure.
Can I respond?
I will call on you and
really quickly.
I reserve my comments.
I would just say I do understand that we are in a tough budget crisis, which has put. I feel like, and maybe this is just anecdotal, our assembly has much more work to do because a lot of what the state is doing is passing the buck on to the assembly to figure it out. But at the same time, I would say, regardless of the budget crisis, they're still putting in all these hours and doing this work. And I know they all work really hard at their own paces, but I want to make sure we continue in a trajectory of attracting people from diverse backgrounds. And I don't see that happening if I don't know what the term is in economics, but we're eroding the salary because it's actually in real dollars. Every year they're just going, and it's not going to attract the type of people we want to focus and give the due diligence to 30 to 60, depending on who you are, hours a week of work, especially with new things they have to worry about, like marijuana, and big things happening in the homelessness issue. That would be my
Yes.
Yeah, I'd say I know you know, in some cases it's almost double the salary, but I think it's been ignored for quite a while and just kind of passed on, and so it's kind of like bringing it up to a point, and nobody is going to get rich off of doing this, even putting it at 60,000. When people run for assembly and are successful, and let's say they have a family and another job, you know, there's got to be a balance and offset, whether they've got to spend the money on childcare or do some offset of scaling back on their current job, stepping away from their current job, and this has just allowed them to continue to live, you know, as I think Melinda Taylor said earlier, you know, they got to pay mortgage, they got to put food on the table, they need to do all that. And I know it's hard to look at when you see it's such a big increase, but it's not an outrageous amount of money. I don't believe at this point.
Mr. Chairman? Also,
Yes.
The other comment though would be, also when you look at executive salaries or division head salaries through either private sector or this would make them more comparable, which is what they are. They're division heads. I mean,
They're not hourly employees, they're
Right,
kind of leadership
right.
level individuals.
So I can understand that.
I have a logistical or administrative question. Not on the amendment, but I think just because of the time. We're running up at 5:30. I know that for some of the members, even going to 5:30 has been a stretch. But we have to, if we are to do anything, am I correct in my understanding that we have to do it before the end of this month? Is that? Okay.
You're correct, Mr. Chair. It says 30 days before the end of the fiscal year. I think that could be on or before December 1st, if you did want to. So I think you need to either finish tonight or schedule another meeting.
Well, we can't schedule because we don't have enough time to notice it. Well, I suppose we conceivably could. I mean, next week is Thanksgiving. I mean, it would be. We could.
How much notice
We
are
can
you
extend this
required?
meeting, or we can schedule another.
You could do either.
Just as long as. What's the notice requirement for scheduling another meeting?
I believe it is, let's see, I know the assembly stuff, a special meeting is 1 day. Can you check, it might be like 48 hours for another meeting, but it's not 7 days. You don't
Oh, it's
have to
not,
have
okay.
7 days for a public hearing, but you don't, the public hearing is closed.
Okay. And so, is there advantages, if we were to go past 5:30 and we have to do it another day, is there an advantage to extending this meeting, or is it better to schedule another meeting?
It's up to the body. There would be no advantage or disadvantage.
Excuse me, go ahead.
Can I just answer?
Yeah,
the-
go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
please go.
issue is whether it's fair to the public to have been noticed, but they've already been noticed of this.
Yes.
So there's no reason not to either continue this or extend it to, for instance, this week. If you had really changed the name of the game, then additional notice to the public would be suggested.
Or can we vote?
We can either vote, or we need to make a meeting.
Yeah. And I'm out of state all next week, so it's gotta be tomorrow or Friday, or now. For people's abilities. Well, let's,
Give your comments.
I'll give my comments. I think we might end up having to extend, but the way, I guess, how I'm looking at it, there's 3 arguments that have been raised. One of them is an issue of fairness. And I would back up by saying, I think our very first person testifying said, you can always get people to run. It might not be fair. And so it comes down to this ability to attract issue, and if you have too low pay, do you filter out who you get able to serve? I mean, so that's a consideration. And even if you could get a diverse or a body that was open to all, what's fair? And even if you could get someone to work cheaper, is it fair? I mean, it's just a fairness issue and an ability to attract. And then, but a third one I also am concerned about is the magnitude of the adjustment at one time, and whether it's something that the public will support, whether it just amounts to good public policy to make that dramatic of an adjustment at one time. Sometimes it can also blow up when a large increase gets rolled back and the intent to raise salaries actually gets defeated. And so I don't know if it would be really correct to second guess ourselves, but it's something to at least think about. If you think that an increase is necessary, is it one that will be supported and will stick? I'm not sure what the right number is, for sure, but if there are two limiting factors, if one of them is what's fair and another limit is what is supported publicly, it kind of works out that it's the lower of the two is the one that sticks. Because you don't want to go higher than what's fair, but you also don't want to go higher than a number that won't be supported. The problem is, with just a few minutes, I'm not sure if I could think through what I think that right number is, but also I don't want us to let the time go by without taking some action, because I think it seems like everybody on the commission is thinking that an increase is justified of some level.
I have a comment about the amount. So I just did some quick math just on the assembly members. So, oh, I'm sorry. Quick math on the assembly member, not using the chair. But the increase is about $27,500, and that works out to about $2,200–2,300 a month. This would go into effect in April, mid-April, and if you do that, it would be less than $10,000 for 5 assembly members for the year.
Oh, as far as the budget impact, that
Right,
18 months.
because I just did 2,000 and I didn't take out the first few months. So if that helps in the compensation wise.
Okay, we're almost on 5:30. Are people able to meet tomorrow or Friday? We just extend the meeting, recess the meeting.
I think so.
Just extend Friday. I'm already, it's pretty much shot for me now anyway. So, go ahead and extend.
I think we need to
I've already
extend
blown my thing
to.
already now. It's okay.
Oh, you need to extend right now?
You might as well,
Yes.
because I need it to be gone by 5.
Is everyone willing to extend the meeting right now?
I'll move to extend, about 15 minutes?
I second it for discussion purposes.
Okay, is there any objection to extending for another 15 minutes?
To your point about fairness, yeah, I think obviously that's one of my basic reasonings for the amendment. It seems like a large magnitude, but I think we've been lagging for so long that it's just a necessary corrective action for some just major lag. Thank you to Karen for doing that math on what it would do.
It's not right math.
Okay,
I'm redoing it.
she's redoing the math. I rescind my.
I was like, thanks.
But that's kind of what I weigh is the issue of fairness and equity, and that's kind of where it's coming from. But yeah, I agree. It is a large magnitude, but I think it'll help our future commission's work. Because I agree with the 1.5 after that, because then we're kind of back on a path. where we can look at cost of living instead of doing these huge jumps. But I think it is important for it to happen. Are you doing it?
I'm thinking, I'm doing it.
Oh, no, that's what she was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like 91.5. It was too good before, sorry.
Well, I think the number is too dramatic of a shift. I'll just say, I'm not sure if I can come up with what my number is in the next 15 minutes. I support an increase. I'm not as concerned after the testimony about the differential between the school board and the assembly widening, which I think this is going to have the effect of doing if we do vote an increase. I suppose I'm coming in, I probably come in at the lowest of the three of the numbers been tossed out. And it's not necessarily because it's what I think would be the number I'd arrive at on a zero-based basis, but just the dramatic nature of the shift.
Mr. Chairman, I think too, I'm not comfortable with it, I can see the headline tomorrow. That says increase, now giving the assembly a $60,000 per person, even though it'll only be parts of them, that's not going to be what the story's going to be. I just think that looks too big of a number. It's the number that looks big, and for the public to take that. I'm just not comfortable with that. But I want them to have an increase, I just don't want.
I think if there were to be a large increase, I think it should be noticed, and we should have
More
public testimony on a dramatic increase. I could see us departing from the 1,000 that we had in our original resolution, plus cost of living.
To comment on Pat's comments, I would just say that I personally I wouldn't concern myself with what the headline was. It's more about us doing our due diligence to make sure they're getting paid for the work they do. They'll write whatever they write, even if we gave them any raise whatsoever. I just have to remind myself that it's more about looking at the workload and the hours they are meant to be available, and just trying to get some semblance of equity and parity with what you would be doing in the professional world, what your salary would be, while still recognizing. I mean, for the amount they're working and the level of work you're doing, this is also not enough, right? But I'm recognizing it's public service, so I'm balancing those two items. But yes.
I'd be surprised if anybody knew just what the salaries were.
They don't.
You're right. And think, like I said, I think it's long overdue. If you go back and look at the workload and the volume of how it's evolved and the big things that the city has tackled and what they have on their plate today. You got the sale of MLP, the marijuana, the homeless, the port, earthquake. I mean, we've had all these really big things that are all consuming for them. And the majority of the Assembly members have stepped up and taken it on, and they've sacrificed, as we heard earlier, some of them have quit their jobs in order to do this job. And I mean, just curiosity wonders how they're even making it. I think that speaks volumes of their willingness to do the public service. I get that it looks, it's a hard number to look at when it's been so low for so long, and where it's at. But as we've talked earlier, it's probably not where it needs to be for what we're asking them to do.
I have a question for Barbara. What's the first quarter revision process? What does the Assembly do, and how is the public involved in that? And it's for our clarification. Because that's when we would be bringing this up, right? That's when it would be.
You have nothing to do. There's nothing to do with that at all.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, that's why I need clarification.
If we met again in January, just hypothetically, would that be the next year for purposes of handling this?
That is correct.
You know, what I worry about is, it's announcing that we're having a meeting to consider what amounts to basically a cost of living increase plus $1,000, and then doing something orders of magnitude larger than that in terms of the salary change without public notice. It's a different issue than whether it's the right number or not. It's just the notice that's accompanied that before.
Through the chair, we did not, the notice that went out did not say, have any numbers in it.
Did the press release?
It did not.
Okay, I remember looking at it, but it didn't.
The press release said that there was a public hearing on the Assembly salary. That's all it said.
Still would like it to be noticed,
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
At this point, I would be comfortable passing what we have at the rate it is now, and then meeting again through the next year to get to the next level. I know it doesn't get us there as fast, but I'm not comfortable with that big a number at this point. But I think through the next, if we had a little more time to work on it, we could come up with something that was much better.
Let me ask another question. If we met next year prior to the municipal election, would it have the same effect? No, it would skip, it would miss an election cycle. Okay.
That is correct.
And next year, we're going to talk about the mayor, so we deferred that to next
Right.
year.
Well, I'd start getting uncomfortable without a press release or saying that we're considering something of this magnitude, changing it as dramatically as this amendment. I can see a bigger number than the 1,000 that's in there in light of the testimony.
Just not sure that's the normal process.
It is not. And not since I've been there.
Okay. It's my understanding we notice when we're going to make changes, and regardless of whether it's no change or a big change, that's when folks are meant to come out and right. And frankly, I think we had a lot of people come talk, and then we had, considering a lot of public hearing that's open, that sometimes there's not anybody that comes in, and we had 10 people? 10 people talk, and then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 emails and letters that we got from other assembly members and people of the public. I mean, I think we. Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So Kim initially put the 60,000, and I did just made the adjustment for the 1.5. What if we took off the 1.5, so we didn't have any increase in 2021? That it would be the 60, and then there wouldn't be an increase in 2021. We could delay that to next year. Just do the one. Would you feel more comfortable with that?
I might even feel less comfortable. The one thing I really would like to see us institute is to not that these salaries erode with inflation. But just making sure that they're protected. So I'm just uncomfortable with the magnitude of the increase. Even though I don't know what the right number is, just doing it in one fell swoop just makes me uncomfortable. I really don't mind if we take a step and take a look at it next year. If we could do a 1-year resolution. We could do that and then look at it again. But I would look. I feel hard. It's kind of odd to be saying this because I've generally been in favor of raising the salaries of elected officials. I just think I agree with a lot of the arguments there. It's just the magnitude of the change in one swoop. We need to either extend or.
I move to extend.
Second. She seconded.
Is there any objection? Okay, we're extending.
Sure, here first. You're on. This is the checks.
So the one thing, Steve, if we waited to do the 2020 increase next year, that would give us a better idea of what the cost of living increase is. That was our thought on waiting until next year for the mayors.
Did you mean 2021?
2021,
Okay.
yes, thank you. So we could defer on that, the 2021.
And just do the 2020. And for that matter, next year we could decide to leave it at whatever the 2020 is.
There's I hate to say this, but there's something about, we all, I think, recognize that the salary is too low. And moving it up, and I get that it's a big amount, but it's kind of like ripping the Band-Aid off. We know we need to move it significantly, so let's just do it, rip the Band-Aid off, and make that big leap. And it may not even be where it needs to be. It may need to be higher, but at least we make this big jump at this point in time. Because we've got an election coming up that we want to make sure that we can start this process of moving people to the more, I don't even want to say a livable wage because I'm not sure it even is. But it just gives them some compensation to help offset the changes that they have to make in their personal life in order to do this.
I'm not convinced that 60 is the right number. if it were phased in over time. I mean, it could be, but we haven't had more than just this afternoon's testimony to, in what was emailed yesterday.
Make it 40. Or just, or 45.
You can propose an amendment. You know, yeah, I'm just trying to say where I'm coming from. I mean, I just don't know. It's awfully quick for such a large decision.
Not to comment on, obviously, this quick time frame because we're in one meeting, but I feel like, as Karen mentioned, ripping off the Band-Aid, or we're correcting an error that has been made for years and years. Because as someone who works in the professional field, I couldn't find anybody for that wage for the amount of work they do, even probably a little bit less than the work that they do, expecting the level of competency we also want. So I don't think, it's not like April 2020 will be 60 and April 2021 it'll be 120. I think this is just correcting an error so that we can continue to do kind of the normal business that this commission does, which is looking at cost of living, making sure we're not eroding, but we're below that. We're way below that right now, so we're correcting a mistake that has been made, or however you want to, whatever cliche you want to use. And then we can get back to the business, making sure that the salary is not eroding over time, because it's not a part-time job. And we can decide whether or not we like that it is or isn't, but that's not the case. It's looking at the amount of work they're doing and what they're being compensated for that, making sure it's fair and equitable.
What we expect them to do.
What the public expects them to do and has now become accustomed to.
Pat, do you want to make a motion on a different number, or do you want to just vote on this?
I was going to say maybe we should vote on this, and then if it passes, fine. If it doesn't, we make a new motion with a different number, which would be better. It'd be better to have it clean.
That is one way to approach it, and it might be the most efficient in terms of time. So, are people ready for the question on the main amendment motion? It's not the main motion, the main amendment.
The main amendment to the resolution?
Yes. Desiree's not here, so I'll call.
I can do that.
Right, or you can do it.
Chair, if you'd like. Steve Rieger,
No.
Pat Redmond,
No.
Kim Hayes,
Yes.
Karen Northworthy.
Yes.
So the motion fails.
Motion fails. So I'll entertain another motion, though, to amend. Pat, if you don't remember.
I don't know, I was just thinking maybe change the 2020 number to like, and I'm not doing all the figuring you guys do.
I can do it.
Like a flat 45,000 or something.
I have a question though, because we voted on the main amendment, and I did that second amendment. Do we have to vote on that as well, Barbara?
We accepted the amendment.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so
we're okay.
Yeah, we're okay.
So, I would propose 45,000 for the assembly chair for the April 2020.
Chair, not member, but
Chair. And for the members, 42,000.
Can I just make a comment?
We need a second comment.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Okay, Karen, go ahead.
So today, the difference between the assembly member and the chair is about 12%, the salary difference.
She's saying yours is
Too close.
it's not 12%.
So what would be 12%?
So which number do you want to start at?
The 45
For the,
as Tim's chair.
also I gotta do reverse math. That's more challenging.
I don't know.
It's easier if you do the, what do you want, the assembly member, and then we just have the chair.
All right, 42 for the assembly members.
I gotta do a little bit more math to make sure it's the right number first.
the differential, Karen, you said that it was?
About 12%, about,
Oh, 47. Is 12?
so the fancy math. So if I started at 42, it would actually be $41,995.20. And then 12% thereabouts, because I gotta do the math to make it work, is $47,028.80.
The first one was no cents, it was 0, 0?
No, 20 cents.
20 cents, sorry. Would you accept that?
Yes, I accept that as a friendly
Accept as a
amendment.
friendly amendment?
Yeah.
So the motion is to amend 22,119-2 to be for 1 year only, and the assembly would be 41,995.20. Chair would be 47,026.80. 02880. I couldn't read my own handwriting. Okay, sorry. 47,028.80.
Mr. Chair, can you please let me know who made the second for that?
Oh, Kim.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yes. We'll stand recess for 4 minutes.
Perfect. And then I'll make a motion to extend,
Okay.
because I think I'm going to extend at 6. Because I have to-
Still a good increase, but it's not nearly where it should be, but I'm just not comfortable making great big, I'm sorry. As much as I know they deserve it, and I know that they do the work, because I watched last night's assembly, I'm still watching last night's assembly. I recorded it for that, but I'm meeting We're taking out the 1.7, take out the 1.5%. I know you stated it without it.
No, I think that restating it took care of clarifying anything that was,
Right, yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
if
that's what I thought.
rejected, then we could expedite clarifying.
And we don't do 2021 until we can do that through the next year. Maybe before September. I hope it would be more logical. It seems like coming in the last at the end of the season.
Time crunch.
When the first time I came, we had a meeting, a couple meetings, and but a friend of mine was on it before, and they had more meetings. I don't know, I still have it, but she gave me a little box. They're bad. They're in this.
Oh,
Back when she was.
you made it.
Okay, Mark, you ready? Okay, call the meeting back to order. I think we might be able to make this without needing another extension if this motion carries. Do you want to move to extend, or do you want
I'd like to move to extend, just maybe, we currently we're going to 6, can we just say 6:15 for my?
Let's do
Sanity.
6:15.
Second. Okay.
Is there any objection? Okay, we've extended to 6:15. Okay, there's a motion to amend in front of us. Is everyone clear on what the motion to amend is?
Go ahead, Karen.
Oh, I just want some clarification. Is it just for 2020, no 1.5 cost of living?
Correct.
Just for 2020, there's no mention of 2021 either way in this.
Okay, thank you.
That will force us to visit the issue in the coming year. Is there any other discussion?
I guess I just would say that I want to make sure that next year we don't stick to just 1.5, because then it's not getting at the issue I talked about. I guess this could also be seen as a large increase, right? Because it's and we're going to do this more than once is my hope. So I was a little disappointed in the first go round, but this I'm hoping to revisit that again, because 47 is definitely an increase, but not quite equitable.
I will just add to that. I do think that if we do big increases over time, I think that's harder to look at than just, like I said, ripping the Band-Aid off, do it, and then we move forward from there. So.
I'll say from my standpoint, if we address this issue again, which I think is the general hope of the committee that we do, I think we'll have more time to fine-tune what number we want to get to, and if it amounts to ripping a Band-Aid, at least a little bit with more time to consider what that number is and get it right. Question's been called for. Let's roll call this one too.
Steve Rieger.
Yeah, I just want to say this is a motion to amend. It's not the main motion yet. Okay, yes.
Patricia Redmond.
Yes.
Kimberly Hayes.
Yes.
Karen Norsworthy.
No.
Okay, so the motion carries. We now have 2019-2 in front of us. Is there any discussion on the main motion to adopt resolution 2019-2 as amended?
I have a question on the current one. The medical allowance. Maybe I'm answering my own question here. So, to clarify, our assembly members currently get $6,500 paid over 12 months that they can use towards their salary or to purchase health care through what mechanism? Through the city or whatever they so choose?
Did you know, I am going to have to tell you, I cannot answer that question. It is ministered by the benefits department. If we have questions about that, we'd have to ask them.
But if it's if they're following this, then we assume that they're following this.
I do believe that the municipality is following this provision as written. It has been revisited in the last year.
Yeah.
The amount? Okay.
Well, let me clarify, not the amount, but the process and procedure has been revisited. And we know that this is being followed.
So that's something else we might want to look at in the future, not tonight, but because we don't have the information.
Well, this is for discussion. I'd like to move to amend resolution 2019-2, section 5. I guess line 1, 2, 3. Currently it's $6,500 paid over 12 months. I'd like to increase that, let's say for discussion purposes, to $9,000.
Is there a second?
Second for discussion.
discussion?
I would just point to the fact that healthcare is the largest expense for most people. And recognizing that, increasing that would be another way of, making sure that we're keeping up with the cost of those things.
I probably am not going to get an answer from Barb, because this is the answer, but is this also something that is subject to the same calendar year thing? In other words, if we address this in the start of next year, it won't take effect till 2021.
That is correct.
Can I just say, I don't know, we'd have to check with benefits if this would trigger some sort of open enrollment process potentially. So we need to do a little bit more research on that.
Can rescind the motion for later discussion in 2020, or next year, is after that, knowing that there's that research we could do. Because I would like to entertain that at a later date then.
If the second agrees, can
Yes,
you
I
withdraw
agree.
her amendment? Okay. Okay, we're back again to the main motion, 2019-2. Is there other discussion? Okay, are members ready for the question? Okay, roll call, please.
Steve Rieger,
Yes.
Patricia Redmond,
Yes.
Kimberly Hayes,
Yes.
Karen Horsworthy.
No.
Okay, the motion carries. We are at, I don't see anything else under new business. There is, unless members think of something, there's no new business. Are there any reports? Hearing none. Member comments?
I'll go first. I'd like to say that I'm disappointed that we didn't go for the amount that I proposed the first time around. I accepted the amendment because I expect to go through the same process next year and make another large increase, because I still find what we did today wasn't quite equitable. It still doesn't attract the crowd of people that we want to come run for office. Right? We want lots of people to want to be engaged and be involved, and it's a huge barrier for a lot of people, especially younger and younger people who should be getting engaged in things like the assembly. But so I do want to see them get an increase. So next year I'll make sure to bring forth the research that gets us there.
Other member comments?
Yeah, I agree with Kim. I'm disappointed that we weren't able to adjust the salary where I think it needs to be right now in order to correct. I think what we've done is just kind of kick the can down the road. And it's unfortunate because we have an election coming up, and I'd like to see a broader group of people interested in running for office to give us all more choices. And I am disappointed, and I do hope that next year when we take a look at this that we will have a better result. So that's why I could not vote for these amendments. So.
Okay. There's another, it's not really public comment on the amendment, but it could be, but it's audience participation. Does anyone have anything else to say? Yes.
Yeah, Melinda Taylor again. I just want to echo what Ms. Northworthy and what Kim said. It's great disappointment. People have devoted their lives to supporting this community, and they deserve to be compensated. And I think it sends a really poor message as we try to increase the professionalism of people who are responsible for fiduciary responsibility for our community. And I really think it sends a poor message. The budget is bad, not because of what you guys are doing, it's because of what's happening up the food chain. The amount of the increase is limited compared to the entire budget. It would not have a completely negative impact, and I'm just profoundly disappointed. I think it sends a poor message to our assembly members about how much they are valued and appreciated in this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
So I echo what Ms. Taylor said, and I just want to comment that recently, in the last 2 years, Mayor Berkowitz did something that I thought took a lot of courage. He gave all department directors approximately a $30,000 a year raise, because for many years they had not received raises, and we were having trouble at the municipality getting people to apply to be directors. We had a lot of acting directors, people who were acting directors for years, because if they accepted the position full-time, they would take a $20,000 to $40,000 a year pay cut, and they would have people working for them that made $20,000 to $30,000 a year more than that. So the mayor stepped up and realized if we wanted to get the best people, if we wanted people to apply for those positions permanently, he needed to increase the salaries. And this was during his election campaign. And it hit the newspapers. And nobody blinked an eye, because it was necessary and it was the fair thing to do, to compensate department directors at a level they needed to be compensated at.
Go my 2 cents. I actually really appreciated Steve's concern with the public perception, and sometimes these things can backfire. But I wondered if it could have been a more creative solution of a step up, 15 this year and then 15 next year. I don't know whether this group can dictate into the future like that. But it sends a strong signal, and yet there's a step up, and yet respecting the budget next year. So that's the thought.
Can I
Go ahead.
respond? That's kind of what I was thinking with this, the next year, because we're going to come back and look at this again for 2021, and that will make some changes. But those are further out because it's the way they're in election cycle.
Through the chair, you could do what Ms. Ennis suggested, but that is not what you did. So the raise that you proposed will affect the 5 members who get elected next year. They will be stuck with that amount for 3 years.
Right, they won't.
They will not get a raise for 3 years.
Right.
Okay. So you can't, if you wanted to step it up, you could do that now, but you cannot do that next year.
It's different. I've been pretty vocal.
Yeah.
That motion.
I would really like for us to have had more time than 2 hours to consider and debate what we think is the ultimate correct number. And I know it comes with some disadvantages, very well articulated here. I think that we'll be able to make a better decision if we take it on earlier with more time and take into account all the arguments that have been raised by all the people testifying. Do we want a full-time or do we not? What impact does the salary have on that? What evidence is there of us being paid other than the 2 cities that are referenced in this letter that we got in our packet? There's a lot more information that we can do and get it right. And I think we set the stage for that really appropriately with the one problem that Barb mentioned, in that we only passed a resolution for 1 year. So we've made it a lot harder for us to just do nothing next year, to take this issue up. And that's what we want to do anyway, so it works.
I had a quick question, a clarifying question on what Barbara said. So right now the resolution is in April 2020, the salary goes up, those people are stuck with it. If you change the resolution to include a 1.5% in 2021, they receive that.
Correct.
Okay. Because then at least, because if we don't deal with that, they get nothing regardless of what we decide next year, because they're already electeds. They're infected. But if we do something to the effect of just something in 2021, at least they're still continuing on a path. I don't know how the group feels about that.
I'm going to do something, well, I said I'll make an amendment
Make a motion.
I'll make a motion. make a motion to amend, thank you. For section 2B2 for April 2021. I know this is going out on a limb, but I'm going to say that for April 2021, the salary is $60,008. Yeah, sorry, I said that kind of goofy. And then for section 1B2 for April 2021, that it is $67,204.80.
Could you please clarify for Desiree and I, which number applies to the chair and which applies to the vice chair, or do they?
So the 60,008 applies to the assembly member for 2021.
Okay, got it.
And then 67,204.80 is for the chair.
Okay, thank you. We have the motion.
To Barbara, do we need to do a reconsideration of the, what we
There's a motion to amend.
But
You need a, I
we'd have to
don't think you need a
rescind,
second.
we'd have to rescind our action passing resolution 29.
No, you don't, it's a motion to amend.
Because we're in the same meeting.
Okay, so I think you need a second.
I'll second.
I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting until 6:30. No, to 6:30.
Yep, that's
Second.
correct. So I have a motion to extend.
It's been moved by Kim, seconded by Pat.
Okay, thank you.
So, so the amendment is for 2021
Correct.
at the numbers that were originally for 2020.
Yeah.
Well, we're open for discussion.
Karen, do you have the number on what the effect would be over the 2 years, kind of like you did before? What the one we accepted for 2020, and then the next one, just so we have an idea. I think it's compared to what you had before.
Well, it's going to be, yeah, give me a minute.
Okay, you can work on that.
It's not that, it's like $1,000.
Okay.
It's about $1,000 difference. Yeah, that's all.
I would just say that's something I'm more comfortable with than the original motion that I voted for, because I do want to see a raise.
Yeah.
It's a step-up approach, and I understand Steve's concern that the time frame that we've had to look at this stuff. But at the same time, the numbers that we're dealing with are not exorbitant for the amount of work they're doing. And I mentioned, or Steve also mentioned about, do we want a full-time assembly? We have one right now. They are working full-time. Some of them are working more than full-time, obviously, but that's, different workloads for different types of people. I know the chair has a bigger workload, and therefore gets a bigger salary. But the numbers that we're dealing with here are not, they're still on the low end for the amount of work and the level of work they're doing. So I don't feel like it's we're going wildly into the unknown on the numbers. I think it's actually relatively a conservative amount for the amount of work they're doing. So I feel comfortable. I like the compromise of this step approach over the next 2 years. It also ensures that people that are going to be newly elected are going to be seeing that step as well.
Any other discussion on the motion to amend 2019-2? Well, I'll just speak to say that for the reasons that I gave earlier, I'm still opposed to this. I still think that the right way to do this is to take a little extra time. We don't have the time this year to figure out what the correct long-term number is. And so I believe we're basically reinstituting the dramatic change that I voted against the first time. And it might be right, it might not be right. It just is too dramatic in this short of a time period. So, is there other discussion?
We take a quick break, because I think we need to tell security guard not to ticket our cars
Oh,
if they haven't already.
We can take care of that for you.
I just always said that, thank you.
What kind of car?
Volvo,
Volvo?
XC90 on this side.
Green Land Cruiser.
Land Cruiser?
A gray Ford Explorer.
The red
HHRI vote. I think they know mine. I have a bumper sticker.
I should have mentioned that. Pat, did you have, I think he was asking if you had
No, I don't have any comments.
Okay. I don't think we need to wait for Barb to get back. We've got Desiree taking notes. Okay, so is there any other discussion on the motion? This is the motion to amend 2019-2 a second time to affect 2021. Okay. Questions been called? Desiree, I'll have to ask you to.
Steve Rieger,
No.
Patricia Redmond,
Yes.
Kimberly Hayes,
Yes.
Karen Norsworthy.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries.
This was 2014.
Is there, we are on audience participation. Is there any other audience participation?
I think we're tired. It's like an assembly meeting.
Right.
Okay. Then we are ready for a motion to adjourn.
We have to schedule a middle schedule, right? Before we adjourn.
Do we need to do anything else?
Besides
Desiree?
adjourn.
Vote on anything?
We have to decide on another meeting for any purpose, because it's only informational. Okay, just making sure.
Remember, we're going to talk about meeting, do you want it early in the year or?
For organization purposes?
Yeah. Or
We should do it early.
maybe
We have more time.
somewhere in the first quarter, I would think.
We could ask Desiree to send us an email, right?
March, April.
April.
Oh, April's election.
After ski season.
That's right. Oh, yeah, you guys are busy then.
May 20th.
May sounds good.
May sounds good.
Middle of the month. On the beginning and end.
We asked
Have you officially adjourned?
We have not.
Nope, there hasn't been a motion. If there were, we couldn't have had this discussion because motions to adjourn are not to do.
That's right. I move to adjourn.
Second it.
Is there any objection? We're adjourned.